Kweku, what have you got?
The Ghanaian Times. So, Kojo, the finance minister, obviously, today, his big day, his first budget as Minister of Finance. He used to be deputy, now he is the man in the chair. And look at the Ghanaian Times front page. It says, public expectations from the 2025 budget: reduce taxes, cost of living, create employment, public urges government. And as you read this on the Ghanaian Times front page, while they talk about cost of living and the prices of goods and services, the Ghanaian Times itself is increasing its price, because currently it's 5 cedis, but on the front page as well, they're advertising a new price of 8 Ghana cedis. So from 5 to 8 Ghanaian Times. On a day the finance minister is going to parliament to talk about how they can reduce the cost of living and do all that.
This is one price that is not going down today.
Exactly. So that is already up. But there's also matters about Galamsey. Government operation cracks down on illegal miners, confiscates 9 excavators, bulldozer, and arrests 4 persons. We know Erastus is doing a lot of work on that. And then the Osahin himself, Alexander Fenyomakin, is on the front page as well. Let's uphold principles of Dr. J.B. Dankwa is there on the front page. And then Oblimpong Dr. Weche Kojo II is Paramount Chief of English Alata, President of Traditional Council. That is according to the Greater Accra Regional House of Chiefs.
Okay. Speaking of J.B. Dankwas, Kojo, there is a story on the Daily Guide front page. J.B. Dankwa killer bail hearing moved to March 25. This is a different J.B. Dankwa to the one that Kweku referenced. There's also a story here. NIB releases Gift Yowari Mensah, the former deputy director for the National Service Authority. And the big story on the front page of the Daily Guide newspaper is the 2025 budget, E-Levy, COVID tax to go. And the story is that that's expected to take just over 6 billion Ghana cedis away from Ghana's revenue. How do they show up? How do they recoup that money? Where will they recoup that money? Remains the biggest question. But I think ultimately this is something that a lot of people are looking forward to hearing.
I have some small inside filler on that, but I'll share it later. I know George.
Where the rest of the money will come from?
Well, it's not about that. It's about the actual taxes to be scrapped. But I mean, I'll share that a bit later. I can't wait to hear George's, behind the curtains info. And after that, I'll share this my one small filler that I've also got.
All right. I like scoops.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
There's another newspaper here. This is called the Economy Times, and it says BOG starts sweeping policy reforms. There's also a story on the 2025 budget. Tax policies dominate discussions, it says. And there's a story here that also says economy says treasury bill rates decline could disincentivize commercial banks. And there's a whole argument and conversation around the continuous decline of the treasury bill rates. And Gideon Boako is saying that it is unsustainable because the monetary policy rate and inflation continue to remain high, and that they don't necessarily align with the decline in treasury bill rates. In other words, he's saying that something is wrong somewhere because those two should move in tandem.
And if you engage other economists as well, there are some who've expressed that concern about the sustainability of this development, and post-budget presentation will give us some insight as in government's borrowing requirement for the year and all the rest, and whether the trend will be sustained or not. And there are serious concerns that the governor of the Bank of Ghana has raised issues about the impact of this on the Ghana city itself going forward, liquidity, and whether the banks themselves will now move to other assets to invest instead of the treasury bill. Because again, the concern has been that these things should be driven by market fundamentals rather than something that is being forced. Because if you have inflation higher than your rate, you have MPC or the policy rate higher than your rate, definitely there will be a correction at some point.
That's important.
Kojo, this is a very interesting story, and I find it fascinating. And it happened in Kenya.
Right.
Now, the president's church donation sparked Kenyan clashes. Now, the story says police in Kenya have fired tear gas to disperse protesters who tried to occupy a church that was recently giving a substantial donation by the president, William Ruto. And the gift to the Jesus Winner Ministry in the Royambu suburb of Nairobi was around 155,000 US dollars, and it drew criticism from some young Kenyans struggling with the high cost of living. And he's going to donate money to the church.
Was this a personal donation?
It looks like a personal donation,
And
but
why did Ruto get $150,000?
Yeah, right?
you understand? Now, Ruto has defended his donation and has offered a similar gift to another church. But the youth have had enough, and they've decided to invade the church. They want the money.
Quite a Christian playboy. But you see, look, I mean, Kenya is ground zero for youth agitation.
Yeah.
They are just not taking any more nonsense. No more of it.
No.
Okay, and Ruto ought to know this.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that he still feels able to publicly make such ostentatious gestures.
Yeah. But it's also a warning to our leaders that in the face of suffering, when you do some of these things, you need to be very careful, because hungry people, desperate people are a threat to national security, and these things can happen. Because when people are going through austerity, you have to show that you identify and you understand their plight, and not be very ostentatious in your dealings, because
You know what?
otherwise these things can happen.
Well, now we know. The measure of wealth. You know you have arrived when what tithe huntier gas, right? Okay. All right. Now George is with us, and I mean George always knows the story behind the story. And as we go into this budget, George, what are you picking up?
It's a quite tight one, very very tight. Only to look at to get the broader direction in terms of what we've been told, that there will be cuts as well. And these cuts is not just about aggressive cuts, because then the minister is also concerned about the impact on growth. So reviewing some projects already that are in the offing, and that review may end up ensuring that there's value for money. That would not be an abrogation of that project, but maybe the initial cost of that project is said to be high. So there will be some review that could end up bringing the cost down, and that could also impact on expenditure as well. Again, apart from cutting what they have described as the wasteful expenditure, also if there are some spending lines that are seen not to be that essential, and it's going to cut across all the ministries, departments and agencies, the advice is now, can we put that on hold if it's seen as non-essential for the year? Again, capital expenditure, the challenge will be which of those capital expenditure has to be cut right now, but also the minister being cautious that whatever cut that we do in the area of capital expenditure shouldn't have any serious impact on growth, because you saw the Q4 numbers where growth actually slowed to 3.6. Therefore, you are worried about what will be the outcome for Q1. So these cuts are going to be targeted in a way that it will not impact on growth badly.
Right.
On the bit about revenue, they are going to be heavy on some compliance measures as well, so that these compliance measures would help again improve the situation, whether it will be a 1 year target or over a period, because the argument is that if you press too hard in a year, it could also come with some shocks for the economy. Businesses want to pay their taxes, but when you're too hard on them, some would also adopt measures to evade some of these tax measures. So it will be more of a medium-term plan to try and aggressively correct the revenue shortfall. Don't forget there's a fund program, and looking at what happened last year, they should be pushing for some level of surplus this year, and that would be a challenge as well. And the impact of whatever happened this year would then influence government's plan on whether after May 2026 they will seek an extension of the fund program, or they will bring an end to the fund program to give the minister some free way to do what they have to do in stabilizing the economy.
All right. Wow. Well, that's really useful. It kind of sets your mind at how you ought to be listening to this budget when it's read. Okay, trying to identify the specific line items. What are they cutting, right? And exactly how are they going to increase revenue, right? So thank you for that. That's very important.
And what it means for you, because one of the things that I feel like is the biggest sham when it comes to our economy is minimum wage. And I know that there is a story that the minimum wage will be increased from 18 cedis to 19.97 in this very budget. Then you ask yourself, what is really the essence of the minimum wage in Ghana? Because what does it do, to be honest? Because elsewhere, it means something. Let's say an hourly minimum wage in the UK is £12 an hour. That £12 an hour, can buy maybe, 9 loaves of bread. But for a daily minimum wage of 19 cedis in Ghana, for a whole day of work, it can buy you 1 loaf of bread.
Yes.
But French, don't forget that.
19.9, you can't get a full
You can't get a loaf of bread. You can't get a loaf
But
of bread.
French, don't forget that in Ghana, our situation is more about ensuring that workers are not exploited. So the minimum wage is the legal floor, but also don't forget the indicative rate that is set for other workers to negotiate. So it went up by, is it a 10%? I stand to be corrected.
Yeah,
The recent
10%,
one.
yeah.
It could serve as an indication for those in the private sector even to push for some level of review in their basic salary as well. So it is more of that, don't pay anybody below that. But that doesn't stop a Fentio who is employing about 10 people to say that
go
based on the current economic conditions, I have to review the salary for my workers. But I get you the connection between Ghana and a UK minimum wage and what it means, and you can walk into a Sainsbury or a Tesco and what you can buy even with just about £10 and still have a good meal in a day.
So, I mean, 'cause if you look at 19.97, that is the new minimum wage that was agreed by the tripartite. If you work every Monday to Friday for 4 weeks, that's 28 days. You are getting 559.16. That is if a company decides to pay the minimum wage. Because, of course,
Which is legal.
and they can decide to pay that. And we are told that if you go to a lot of these industrial bases, some of them actually pay minimum wage.
The contract
Yes.
or more
And
service.
so if you get
or
559.16 for 28 days, you look at transport and you look at food. What food are you going to get to eat anywhere in Accra? Transportation, that will amount to 559 being able to take. Because mind you, currently, National Service Personnel Allowance is up from 559 to 730.
Hey.
So NSPs are getting more and somebody will be getting this. So I think in TUC's press release they put out yesterday, they actually want to do away with this completely.
That's what I'm
because
saying.
they feel
It's
like
a
it's been
sham.
emboldening some outlets and some entities say that, well, listen, this is the legal limit, we can't go below. And so if we are just there, or we give you 20 CDs a day, we are just way
but Kojo, I think that it's a tight budget. It's going to be a tight budget.
Called him Kojo.
No, I'm just trying to address Kojo here,
okay.
but also
I'm also here.
what this thing should tell all of
I'm
us is
also in the
about
room.
how those who are managing the political space should
Yeah.
manage expectations.
All right.
Because we are not doing enough to deal with the rigidity of our budget and expand the revenue lines and also contain our spending. So you realize that even if you want to check excesses or control spending, there's little room for what you can do. Take
Yeah.
away your compensation for public sector workers and eventually everything is finished.
Yeah.
You don't have any space again to do anything.
Yeah.
And you've gone out there, you've promised people that you do this, there'll be road here, there'll be that, and then it becomes a problem for you.
George, what
Okay.
do you make of the point of view about the taxes that the government is doing away with? So let's say all the taxes that they're doing away with are estimated to cost about 6.4 billion in revenue.
There are some who are even projecting a higher rate amount
Okay.
than that, about 10 to 11 billion Ghana cedis.
Exactly.
It's
In a
much
year.
more than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, those taxes were being taken from the pockets of Ghanaians, correct?
Yeah.
So, without those taxes, is that money staying in the pockets of Ghanaians? How about that argument? That is money that is being kept in the pockets of Ghanaians. Is that a legitimate argument to make?
It's a very interesting development. I mean, depending on where you stand. I mean, there are some who are saying that government is still trying to appreciate the numbers. So there are some who've pushed the school of thought that can we wait for a mid-year budget review to completely move away these taxes? Because you have a hole that you have to plug. Are you assured? And that's where the fund will be asking government that we need, you want to deal with what they call budget integrity or some confidence in the budget, that when you tell people that this action will bring in X amount of revenue, you can be assured. Don't forget that we're here. The previous administration promised that E-Levy will bring in X amount of money. Now with this, your compliance measures that you're going to push, rationalize taxes, are you assured that it will bring in more than what these tax lines that you're taking out will bring to you or not? And if any semblance of these things hit the market, then you have your investors and these bond buyers and all that react negatively. So it's a huge challenge here. It is good. There is always the political economy and the real economy. But how do you tread cautiously so you don't hurt your budget, you don't hurt your economy, and then end up doing a reversal and now coming through, maybe introducing some levies and all the rest to correct or deal with this gap, Kojo?
Yeah, so I told you guys that I had a little bit of a scoop. It's about these taxes, all right? So while we're on it, let's deal with it. So here are the numbers, first of all, and this is from our own research team. The betting tax brings in some 5.2 billion. The E-Levy brings in some 8.1 billion. The big one is the COVID levy, which brings in 13.9 billion. Okay, so these three taxes alone, if you put them together, you're well over 22 point something billion.
Wow.
Right? 24 point something billion, right? Have I done the maths well? I wrote maths twice. I keep reminding you. No, it's more than that. It's
I'll give you the numbers again.
Yeah. 13.9 billion plus 8.1 billion plus 5.2 billion. Right. So these are the taxes that have been proposed to be scrapped. Now, my sources, very highly placed in the finance ministry, tell me that today they will announce the scrapping of the betting tax and E-Levy. So as soon as Parliament approves it, or whatever the process is, from that day onwards, we will no longer pay E-Levy when we transfer money. Okay, and the rationale is very simple. Why are we penalizing those who transact electronically as opposed to those who use cash? That's retrogressive. So that tax is going. Now the COVID levy, which is the biggest of them all, 13.9. The COVID levy alone is more than the E-Levy and the betting tax together.
Combined, yeah.
Right? The COVID levy, there is a strategy for its removal. That is rather the tax that we might be hearing of its removal somewhere near the mid-year review. Because you see, they want to do more than just remove the COVID levy. COVID levy is part of the VAT structure. And they are very concerned about the entirety of our VAT structure.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a problem with the whole thing. So instead of just removing one of the levies to reduce the percentage or whatever it is, which it will not solve the problem long term. So they have to restructure the whole thing, and that is not the kind of work you can do before the 11th of March when you came into office on the 7th of January. So the COVID levy will go, but not immediately. The ones that are going immediately are the E-Levy and the betting tax. And that's my scoop from my sources, very highly placed.
That's a good scoop.
Yes.